Welcome everyone to today's discussion of the What's and Waffle series set up by GABA and Intertrust. Thank you so much, Intertrust, for partnering with us on this again and again. I'm Michaela Berleck, GABA's Executive Director. We are very excited that Florian Kolb, GABA expert and leader in clean tech and Chief Commercial Officer and General Manager of Energy of Intertrust, will talk to Steve Wesley today. Before Florian introduces Steve to us, let me say a few words about GABA. The German-American Business Association is an alliance of corporations, organizations, and professionals with the purpose of strengthening transatlantic business. Through our events and networking opportunities, we offer a platform for our members and other professionals to learn, connect, and build lasting business relationships. We are planning an exciting online event program this year, and we will offer in-person events again as soon as it's safely possible. We are working on several events in clean tech and smart infrastructure, smart cities, and more. So if you're not yet on our distribution list, please sign up at gaba-network.org to receive information about upcoming events. Without further ado, Florian, let's get started.
Yes, hello, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending where you are. My name is Florian. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of Intertrust. We are a Silicon Valley-based data technologies company. And yeah, I started the tradition of doing these fireside chats in the analog time, and now we moved this to digital. So, Michaela, thank you very much for your brief words. And GABA is an excellent organization, so we are very happy to support. And we're also very happy that today, Steve Wesley agreed on my invite to have a chat about a very exciting topic, which is what are the implications of the Biden presidency on energy, transportation, and climate-related technologies. So Steve and myself, we know each other for a few years, 2015. And personally, I have to say that on the political side, I was a newbie to the US, and Steve helped me and guided me through all the things that happened since 2015, which I would say in my wildest dreams, I would have never thought would happen. So he was a great mentor and business partner since then. So for those of you who are not aware who Steve is, so first of all, he's a very, very prominent and well-known personality in Silicon Valley. He taught as a lecturer at Stanford Graduate School of Business for 6 years before doing many other things. He helped take eBay public in 1998 as a senior vice president of marketing, sales, M&A, and international. He also has a very interesting political background. So he served as the elected controller and CFO for the state of California, which in fact is the world's 5th largest economy, for those of you who are not so familiar with California. Steve founded the Wesley Group, which is one of the largest venture funds in the US focused on smart energy, mobility, and buildings. And Steve was also an early investor and served on the board of Tesla Motors, which of course is a very prominent company these days. Everything that's going on, it's very exciting. So Steve, good to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Thank you. So for those of you who would like to post some questions during the chat, if you take your cursor onto the Zoom screen, then you see a Q&A icon, which is next to the leave button. Please don't push the leave button, push the Q&A button if you have a question. And via that, you can post your questions throughout the talk or shortly thereafter, and then we will answer the questions that come in via this Q&A function. Okay, let's get started. Steve, I have a first short warm-up question for you. I mean, how do you feel about what happened since the elections in November? I mean, it's hard to even describe what happened. So what are your thoughts?
Well, look, first, I think the world breathed a collective sigh of relief that Americans came to their senses and voted Biden in. I believe we will now rejoin the civilized world. We will rejoin the Paris protocols. We will rebuild our relationship with NATO. It's going to take some time, but I think the US is back and heading in the right direction. Second, what we saw, it's a wake-up call to America. We've never seen anything like this. And what is really, I think, happening is the result that America, which has had the world's largest economy for many decades, has not done as good a job at taking care of the people who are undereducated, who ended up losing their jobs in the 90s and early 2000s. And those people were looking for cheap and easy solutions, and Trump was the first to provide them. So I think for every American, it was a wake-up call that we need to do better about making sure that we reduce the gap in income disparity in our country so that there are not as many people who feel dispossessed. But I am optimistic about the future. I think our economy is coming back. I think Biden will focus on the right issues. And again, I think we will begin to rebuild the partnerships that have made us successful over the last 100 years. Now, by the way, it may be a while before we vote for a presidential candidate with a German name again. I'm a little worried about that one. But otherwise, I think America's heading in a good direction.
Yeah, that's something which is interesting. Actually, I've been to the village where the ancestors of the Trump family come from, and they have excellent wine and excellent food.
Should have stuck to winemaking.
Yeah, we leave it where it is. Still, I think we still have to look back a bit, and even if it's painful. So how much damage do you think did the last US government leave behind in energy and climate policies?
Well, I think it's caused damage, a lot of damage. I mean, by any standard, and I am a fairly moderate Democrat, but I think a lot of Republican presidents have done relatively good jobs leading our country. Trump was something quite different. He was someone who wanted to break our treaties, go it alone, and I think caused the country damage in a couple of areas. One, we need to get back into an area where we're working constructively with our NATO allies, our CETO allies in Asia, and redevelop those ties economically. Second, I think President Trump steered the country through 4 economically relatively successful years, but ran up a historic deficit. And I think, especially in a time of COVID, it's easy to continue to do government bailout after bailout, but at some point you must pay attention that this does not trigger inflation. So I think President Biden will have a lot on his plate. I do think he'll do an initial stimulus, but after that, we're going to have to do a better job of putting our own economic house in order, and I'm confident we'll do that. But digging out of COVID, it's going to take some time, and restoring our alliances will take some time as well. I wish the current president good luck. And I'm somewhat optimistic he will reach out across the aisle and try to form a bipartisan coalition whenever he can. Americans, I think, strongest when we're successful at doing that.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So what I take from this is that you think that Biden will be able to fix the damage, but it will take a little bit of time. So coming to California, we are, some of us live here, and we've been following very closely on California energy policies. Also, there's a strong partnership between Germany and California. A lot of exchange between government officials around, how to reduce CO2 emissions stemming from electrical energy and so on. A lot of visits, a lot of joint conferences in the pre-pandemic time. When you look at the US, what role do you think can California play on a national level for climate and energy policies in the US?
So this is a really important question. And again, I've been involved in California politics for 40 years. As you mentioned, Florian, I was elected controller and chief financial officer of the state of California in 2002. And we had a historic recall of our governor in 2004 over the issue of runaway energy prices. And in the middle of the term, for the first time in California's history, the voters removed our governor, and all of a sudden I found myself working for an Austrian bodybuilder. So this is not what I had expected. But here's the punchline. It's best to think of California not as one of 50 states, but as a nation state of its own, the world's 5th largest economy. And the punchline is this. Western Europe is the global leader in smart and green energy policies. California is right up there with Western Europe, setting policy and regulations one after another to help move this country forward. And generally speaking, what happens in California eventually happens in the rest of the country. So it's important for the world to see California succeed. We've now had a succession of 5 governors who one after another have been a progressive voice on energy issues. And what happened in the early 90s is California set its first renewable energy standard to get to 20% renewables by, I think, 2010. And of course, the business community came out and said that will never happen. And we got there a year early. And our legislature came out again and said we will raise it to 30% renewables by 2020. And we beat that as well. Now they've raised the bar to 50%. This is important because to the extent globally successful economies like Germany, like California, like other European nations can show that going green is not bad for the economy, it is not bad for the jobs, that it is the future of the planet and also is a job creator, that is a good thing for all of us. And I think you will continue to see California setting standards for rebates for electric vehicles, putting pressure on utilities to go renewable more quickly. At some point, I suspect there will be a ban on fracking, but we will be pushing the agenda to get to a carbon neutral future. And we're happy to be doing that hand in glove with the Canadians and the Western Europeans.
Excellent. So based on that, what do you think is the top priority topic for President Biden that he should address right now?
Well, the first thing he has to do is solve COVID. And I think, as you know, President Trump had his head in the sand. He was a COVID denier, said it was nothing worse than a bad cold or flu. And obviously, he was in denial. I think Biden's come in, made this his first priority. He said, you may recall just 4 weeks ago, I, as president, Joe Biden, will commit to inoculating 100 people a day for 100 days. And people said, 1 million people a day for 100 days. This was viewed as very bold. We are today in America inoculating 1.3 million people a day. Literally by next week, we'll be up to 1.5 million per day. I hope by the end of February, we're at 2 million people a day. That is job number one. Once we do that, our economy gets back to work and we can hopefully put COVID behind us. I think the next big issue will be a series of green legislative pieces of legislation. They will focus in 3 areas: greener vehicles, higher green energy standards for our utilities, and there will be a massive push at greener buildings. Buildings, people forget, use as much as 40% of the nation's energy. In Western Europe, your buildings are much more energy efficient and frankly well built. The United States needs to follow Western Europe's model. So expect to see a green energy package passed by Biden and the Democrats. But here's the interesting part. Looking backwards for the last 50 years, the Democrats say, yay, on green energy, we're for it. But it's been hard because green energy is historically been more expensive. After about 2016, 17, 18, for the first time, we're seeing in the late teens and now in 2020, 21, where green energy is in fact cheaper in most of the world. So this issue is becoming more politically popular by the day. And what's hard for the Republicans is they've traditionally said no to green energy because they get their money from the oil companies and the coal companies. What's hurting the Republicans today is an increasing number of employees and jobs and voters in states like Texas, Oklahoma, Michigan, a lot of the Midwest are becoming wind and solar jobs. So you're going to see an increasing number of Republican members of Congress switching on this green energy initiative. That will be good news for the Democrats, good news for Biden, good news for the American economy, and frankly, good news for the planet.
I mean, coming to that topic you just described, so green energy and growth. I mean, playing devil's advocate here a little bit, if you look at the history in Germany, I still very vividly remember, so the German energy transition was triggered around 2000 by Chancellor Schröder from the Social Democrats, and together with the Green Party, there was a coalition with the Green Party, and there was all this promise that if we move to renewables and we move to green, this will create hundreds of thousands of jobs in Germany. And now if you look back and you study the history, here's what happened. So a lot of money went into subsidized rooftop solar and solar panel production. So there was like an increase of employment in the green economy. But what then happened is that the Chinese government took a decision that this will be a core focus area for the Chinese industry. And literally, I would say, they entirely wiped out all these German solar jobs. And, on the wind side, it's not that harsh, the reality, but also there were like a few bankruptcies and a lot of consolidation on the wind side. So, I mean, in hindsight, this job promise around green economy seems to be like a pretty complex animal. So how do you think this will play out in the US? So, do you think we will see short-term, long-term growth, or maybe the times have also changed? Yeah. So what happened in Germany is like 10 plus years ago. We have a new paradigm in many areas. So what's your thoughts?
So this is a great question, but you must always move into the future, move forward, looking at the future, not trying to drive by looking at the rear view mirror. And I think looking backward, you are right. Many countries moved too early at solar and wind. And I know Germany plowed through a lot of taxpayer offers with very little to show for it. The US did a similar thing. We made a big investment at a firm called Solyndra, and there's a big stimulus program, and some of these investments did not work out. But on balance, it's a smart thing. And there's important to understand the difference between the bleeding edge and the leading edge. I used to work at the Department of Energy for Jimmy Carter. And he was on the bleeding edge and said, the US, I want solar to happen. And he put solar panels on the White House. But the fact is, it cost $80 a watt to install solar then. It was at the bleeding edge. You could hope all you wanted for solar, but it was going to be a money loser and a job loser. I think Obama came in right at that transition point. But in 2020, and for the rest of our lives, green energy is the most cost efficient, and frankly, the most politically popular energy source there is. The missing part of the equation for the last decade has been there has not been cheap power storage on the days where the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow. That has been largely fixed because the cost of lithium-ion batteries have gone down over 90% in the last decade and are continuing to go down. And by the way, that is a great segue to what I call the Tesla revolution, because Tesla has not only evolved into the world's most valuable auto company, but they're actually changing the parameters of taking battery costs down more quickly. If they continue to do that, they may own the future not only of vehicles, but of energy as well.
Yeah, so we will come to that in a bit. Staying still at this, growth scenario, green economy growth, what will the growth be? times have changed apparently, but I mean, still, you know, since the election, I enjoy very much following US politics a bit more than I should have already the last 6 years that I've lived here. And I hear a lot of noise around the fear of losing fossil fuel related jobs, which under the old government apparently has been a major political bloc. So how will the Biden administration address these fears and, you know, take people along so there is even a broader consensus for a green economy and a green future?
Yeah. So I was just looking at job numbers and preparing for this. There are more jobs today in the sustainability field, notably wind and solar, more renewable energy jobs in the United States today than there are in carbon-based fuel industry. This is unheard of in the United States. By the way, and I say this for my German friends to give you some historic perspective, when I grew up in this country, the top 10 largest market cap firms in the world, you had 6 oil companies and 3 US auto companies, and the 10th firm was either US Steel or General Electric. You feel pretty good about being an American. The rub is times have changed quickly, and not all of these companies got the memo of how quickly we're changing to green energy. Today, in the top 10 highest market cap companies in the world, not one energy company remains. All of the oil companies have dropped out. Exxon's seeing a record bad year. They did not see we're moving toward a green future. And by the way, this future is going to be fueled more quickly because when you have today almost 30% more green energy jobs in the United States and voters heading toward a 2x differential, that will move politics toward the green in our country even more quickly. This puts the Republican Party in a tough space because they're going to quickly have to change positions on this, or they will increasingly lose elections. And again, mark my words on this, you will see states like Texas that have largely been based on an oil economy switching over to a green economy, and that will change voting patterns in that state. By the way, if Texas becomes a blue voting state, it makes it very hard for the Republicans to win a presidential election, but time will tell.
I was thinking that you might say then we all move to Texas because there's like this story that, you know, a lot of people from Silicon
we joke about that. The Texans say, "Oh my gosh, we're so much better than California." Another California company just moved to Texas, and there is some truth to this. It's just hastening the time that they become a blue state. We will see.
Yeah, I mean this topic of fossil fuel job losses. I think there's some good case study also, you know, what happened in Germany. So I happen to work for a company called RWE, Rheinisch-Westfälisches Elektrizitätswerk. As you maybe can hear from the name, it was like a very traditional, over 100-year-old company built on coal and gas, and also a lot of mining activity. And I mean, what you saw happening over the last 5 years, that Germany relatively quietly decided a coal exit, and especially in the regions that are highly impacted, which is in eastern Germany, the Lausitz and the Rheinische Revier in West Germany, so the area around Cologne, where RWE operates all these mines. I would say, from my perspective as an observer, there was a lot of consensus building. There was a lot of, you know, taking people along, and also there is a lot of money involved to compensate for this structural change, so that, you know, the people who are impacted, and, you know, I know a lot of the people who are impacted personally, who are very proud of their lignite mining activities and, you know, providing electricity to millions of households based on this mining activity. It's kind of a more balanced approach, and so I think it's a good case study to look at, you know, how you maybe can get these transformations going in a relatively peaceful process that doesn't include, you know, a lot of political volatility, to call it like you know, something like that. So that's my advice to.
Yeah, look, I think Germany has been a model to move off a largely coal and nuclear-based economy to a much greener economy. I think you've done that in record time. I know it was painful, but I think Chancellor Merkel will go down as one of the great leaders in history. She's taken some tough stands and she's delivered. The US needs to go through the same painful process. And as you just watched in the election, it's hard. We have states, West Virginia and Ohio, that are wedded to the coal and carbon fuel past. But those states are, even those states are moving toward more green energy. And I think by the next election, this issue will have largely been decided once and for all. By the way, in the background, we're seeing this move to electric vehicles that is faster than anybody had anticipated. America has had a love affair, a painful love affair with big gas guzzling vehicles that Europeans barely understand. And the bigger the roar and the more cc's and cylinders you had, the better. That world's going away in the US. And you may have seen as recently as last week, General Motors said we will be all electric by 2030. And I'm here to tell you, they will get there before that because the cost of lithium-ion batteries is going down so precipitously. So this world of energy and smart vehicles is changing faster than most people realize. It's changing for the better. Smart economies like California, where Tesla's headquartered, saw that future first, and it will pay big dividends for us.
Yeah. Excellent. So let's move on from the meta level a little bit into specific sectors, and we already touched some of them. So from your perspective as a venture capitalist, what do you think are the most promising areas for investment around climate, energy, transportation right now? So take us along the money journey, which is important.
Sure. And again, our venture firm has 15 of the world's largest energy and auto companies as investors. So it's everything from Eon and ABB and Volkswagen Group Audi in Europe to Duke and Vistra in the US and Dominion to China Light and Power, Tokyo Gas and Power, Origin in Australia. We've got a global investor base. And so I would speak for all of them in saying there's a few overarching themes. One theme is we're moving toward the electrification of everything, not just cars, that's old news, but the electrification of trucks, buses, trains, boats, and believe it or not, in the not too distant future, aircraft. Lithium-ion batteries will replace oil as the coin of the realm, as what the global economy will be based on for much of the next 10 or 20 years. And a lot of our investors are looking at how do we rebuild out this global electric recharging grid? So that's probably one of the biggest. The second issue, and Florian Kolb, you know this better than anyone, utilities are moving from a world of just producing energy to a world where they must manage energy. And we refer to it as the digitization of energy. And in simple terms, what this means is you will see in the future an arbitrage of power between the utility, buildings, homes, hospitals, universities, offices, and vehicles all the time. This will create a more efficient, greener world, but you'll hear a lot about the smart management and transfer of energy for the rest of our lives. There's all sorts of other interesting areas, from green hydrogen to how you help companies green their supply chains, that are all important. But just note, we at our firm will rarely invest in anything that requires manufacturing, moving of heavy equipment, small margins. The future is in this digitization of the energy and mobility sectors, and that's where we focus. It's fascinating and it's changing faster than people know.
Yeah, I absolutely agree to that, being exposed quite a bit to it. So what are the companies and technologies, and very important, I know that's very close to your heart, the personalities, so the people that will drive the shifts in these areas.
Yeah, well, you mentioned personalities, so let's start with the most, flamboyant, hard to have ever predicted personality of all, Elon Musk. And I've known Elon for over 25 years. He recruited me to serve on the board at Tesla. I actually was at eBay and began the process of buying PayPal from Mr. Musk, which helped finance what he's done in the last 10 years. And Musk is an extraordinary guy. He is difficult, irascible, hard to work with, a pain in the ass, but he is redefining the 21st century. And I think the planet is going to be better for it. What is so interesting, and I'm going to ask Ambrielle just to pull up one slide, which really tells the story. I think it's the Tesla slide, slide 3, I believe, is a lot of companies literally up until 2 or 3 years ago were saying no one's going to buy electric cars. They were in denial. They did not see the cost down curve of lithium-ion batteries. Lo and behold, Tesla, and this is as of the end of the year, Tesla is now trading in the high 700s, has a market cap higher than Toyota, Volkswagen, Daimler, GM, BMW, Ferrari, Hyundai, Honda, and Ford combined. And some people say, this is a joke, it's all going to change. I think Tesla is overvalued, but it's really important to do a full stop here and understand Tesla got 3 things right before anybody else. First, they saw the world was going all electric way before Volkswagen and GM and the others, and Toyota is still in denial, and that is crippling their company today. Second, they realized that they were not just selling a car, a box, a piece of metal in a one-time transaction with customers, not to be repeated for another 5 or 7 years, but they understood the power of making every vehicle a connected car. And cars are now people's number 2 connected device right after their iPhone. And there are real questions about whether someday they might become number 1. Then by the way, the margin you get if you're Volkswagen on a single car may be $800 to $900. Tesla, it's obviously a good bit more. Porsche, it's a lot more. But if you can start selling what are called OTA, or over-the-air subscriptions, and charge users $10 a month for this, that, and the other thing, all times 12, Tesla's figured out a way to increase the profit margin of vehicles because they understand they're no longer just cars, they're connected devices. Third thing is Tesla realizes that they're an energy company. And because they're not just putting batteries in the vehicles, but they're leading in battery development and are literally moving LG Chem, CATL, and the other battery manufacturers down the cost curve more quickly. Tesla is rapidly filing to be their own energy company in Western Europe and Australia, selling power storage. So there are many chapters for Tesla left to go, but it's an interesting space to keep an eye on because it's changing the world we all live in.
Yeah, I mean, coming from Germany, of course, our hearts are also very close to cars. For a lot of people, Porsche, BMW, Daimler, Volkswagen, all these great brands, best cars in the world. No doubt about that. I sound a little bit like Trump. And I mean, what I personally found very fascinating, I'm following like the last 4 or 5 years, what's being published also in Germany, in the German media, the opinions about Tesla. And I remember very well that, every problem Tesla had with manufacturing, not delivering on numbers, was, at least from my perspective, like really celebrated in in publications. And I got like a little bit skeptical because I was asking myself, why are people so vocal about these failures? In Germany, we call it the Schadenfreude, which is something that is also known in the US. So I had the impression there's there's a lot of this Schadenfreude involved, because there is this fear of this unknown thing is coming, and but we are so big, and if you look to the balance sheets of the German car companies, there's a huge amount of cash on these balance sheets still. So they felt very strong, and I mean, all of that noise has disappeared since he delivers the numbers he's promised, and with certain delays, also the operational things he's promising on when to launch a car, even if there are some delays and some issues on the quality sometimes. And I think it's a very good example of the struggles that established corporates have in innovation land. I assume one day there will be a lot of Stanford and Harvard Business School case studies on at least those companies, car companies, incumbents that missed the boat to a certain extent. And I don't know, but maybe also energy companies, because as you said, Tesla is moving into the energy space and has the freedom to look ahead many more years than some of the incumbents that have to satisfy the return requirement of their shareholders every quarter, like in many other areas as well. So do you think that the share price will stay where it is, or do you think we will see some changes?
No, I think Tesla's share price is coming down. Great company, doing most everything right, but it's still overvalued maybe by half. But look, we live in bubbly times. I've been through 3 or 4 of these things. There will be a correction in the market. For those of you who are investors, there are still fundamentals. I teach at the Graduate School of Business, and historically the market trades at 13 or 14 time multiple of earnings. When you get up to 17 or 18, you're an investment advisor, you tell people time to put a little money in bonds. Today we're at 22, 23x. That usually means you're on borrowed time. And I think a lot of the tech companies that I love, the Amazons and Teslas of the world that have done things right, you will see them come down because they have really been bid up to extraordinary levels. But don't discount Tesla. They're still getting stuff right. There's one other issue I wanted to touch on, and I think about this a lot, and I call it the paradox of being number one. America had a golden age of cars in the 50s and 60s, and we made a lot of great cars then, and then we became complacent, stopped innovating, and the Germans and the Japanese passed us by like that. And that is the world we've lived in probably in the last 20 years until Tesla showed that Americans can innovate in the vehicle industry again. What I find quite interesting is that one of my favorite auto company executives globally is Herbert Diess. And I think he has been the rare guy who's shown he knows the ability to remake the Volkswagen company. And I think over the next 10 years, he might be the one who not only catches up with Tesla, but possibly passes them. But we're quite interested in what the Volkswagen Group is doing, in our opinion, far ahead of General Motors, far ahead of Toyota. Let's see how that smackdown occurs between Volkswagen and Tesla for the next 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think one observation that I'm having is that there's a huge cultural challenge, and here's one observation. So Herbert Diess, he went to LinkedIn to post on LinkedIn, I think a few months ago, and what I read, he got bashed by some people. I mean, he has a lot of internal enemies, I think, in the Volkswagen Group, but he got bashed just because he's using social media.
Yeah.
And well, that's the environment he's facing. So Elon Musk, we don't have to comment on his social media behavior. We are all aware that that's very different.
We spent a lot of time on this industry, and I think he gets it better than most. The fundamental issue is if you're an auto company executive for the last 50 years, looking backward, you wake up every day, you think about 2 things. How many units did I sell? And did I move up 1/10 of a point on the JD Power quality analysis? That is no longer the path to success. Now it's moving quickly toward what is the in-cabin experience and how green is the vehicle. That's what millennials are looking at. I happen to drive a BMW convertible because it has a stick shift, and I love the ultimate driving machine. My kid can't drive a stick shift. No kid can drive a stick shift, and they don't care about the ultimate driving machine. They're happy with Uber, and they can't wait till we have autonomous vehicles. So a lot of the battle will be won by the companies that look into the future and make those changes more quickly. And increasingly, car buying decisions will be made by what is the internal quality of the vehicle, not how many horsepower does it have. By the way, I'm here to tell you the move to autonomous vehicles is happening faster than most people realize, and you'll begin to see the first ones commercially available on the street within the next 5 or 6 years. So there's some controversy for you right there.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. I mean, I know that you're invested in autonomous driving, and we talked about it a few times over the last years. I mean, when will this lift off, and what will be the impact?
So again, for everything we do, we look for the inflection point. Again, I'll draw just a picture in the air. When I worked at the Department of Energy, solar, $80 a watt to install. And the question is, when does it get broad adoption? And it comes down to 70, 60, 50, 40, 30. No one buys any solar in the 80s, 90s. It didn't really move the meter until solar got down to about $3 a watt. At that point, everybody says, whoa, it's cheap, it's popular, it's easy, and it's still going down. But at that point, after no movement in consumer buying patterns for solar, it doesn't go like this, it goes like that. And the point is, when you hit the inflection point, and by the way, lithium-ion batteries hit the inflection point literally last year when the cost for the first time gets down to about $100 per kilowatt per power storage. The big issue for autonomous vehicles is a combination of two things. It's the software, kind of the neural network inside the vehicle that reacts quickly. But I will tell you right now, we're essentially there for autonomous driving. The big missing piece is LiDAR. LiDAR is the function that is, if you will, the eyes for a car. And the reason autonomous vehicles would be better is human beings have two eyes, and they're generally speaking only look in one direction. With LiDAR, you can have forward-facing, back-facing, sideways-facing, and new LiDAR sees not 100 meters as human beings generally see, but can see 250 meters in snow, rain, fog, at night, in all directions. That is what ultimately makes autonomous vehicles more efficient and safer. The big question that's going to come up, though, that no one thinks about or talks about is who will own cars in the future. Because I'm here to tell you, literally within 10 years, the vision of taking your wife and children to the auto dealer and looking at the cool cars and smelling the leather, that's going out the window. And one of the issues is, if you're a tech company like Google or Apple, you think, we own the cars of the future. We'll be making them and owning them and operating. Now, if you're Uber or Lyft or Didi Chongqing, you have a different view. They think they'll be owning them. Some of the car companies think they'll be owning them. Some people will say the cities, municipal governments, or possibly the utilities will be owning cars in the future because they can build them into the rate base and ensure the lowest possible cost for the citizens. So the world is changing, and I will say the winner will be the ones that embrace innovation and are willing to take risk. My money is Silicon Valley does pretty well over the next 50 years.
He says with a big smile. Okay, that's great. So the last topic for our conversation, and then we move to questions. We have quite high quality questions here. Zooming back out, the international perspective. Now, as a German living in the US, I was very interested in following the discussions between the US and Germany around gas supplies in Europe, a controversial topic. What do you think about what I would call the interference of the US government in the supply of Russian gas to Germany via Nord Stream 2, which just on the weekend, they started to continue building Nord Stream 2.
Yeah. So look, I don't think the US should be trying to dictate energy policy to anyone. And I think Germans should buy natural resources from whoever can provide it most cheaply and in the most secure way. But I would note, now that the US has rejoined the global order again, that Europe and others will have choices to make as to whether to be more in a Western alliance or more in an alliance with Russia and China. I think over time, a Western alliance will ultimately be stronger and better. Most people don't understand that Russia has an economy about the same size as Spain. If they didn't have nuclear weapons, they would be a bit of an afterthought. What this means is if oil prices ever crater, I think Russia may be in for a period of instability. This could be happening now with Navalny going back, thousands being arrested. And I think Germany should, of course, always seek the lowest prices for energy, but they also need to give some thought to the fundamental issue that Russia is just a bit more unstable than many people, I think, realize, and authoritarian dictatorships have more issues than not. But I know after 4 years of Trump, Americans need to be careful about giving advice to anyone. We understand that the Germans, like everybody, needs to diversify. We'll see how this works out over the next 10 years. But it's easy to say Putin has run Russia with an iron hand and will die in office and nothing's going to change. But we live in an age of the internet, and I think there may be more instability in Russia. We'll see. Germans must factor that into their decision making.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing to add here is that, you know, by no means is this pipeline not controversially debated in Germany. And, you know, I think it's very interesting to see which alliances we see in the discussion. So, for example, people from Eastern Germany, politicians, are more pro-Russian and more in favor.
Yeah.
And I don't think they have like immediate economic benefit from that, because, you know, once the thing is built, the gas flows. That's it. So there's I don't think there is a growth advantage. It's more like, you know, they're culturally pretty close. And then on the other side of the spectrum, of course, there's the Green Party, which probably or very likely will be part of the next government, who states, you know, we don't need this gas at all. We shouldn't burn gas at all for, you know, producing electricity or heat or whatever. And probably a realistic scenario is in between. But I think if you look at the energy mix in Europe and also in Germany, I mean, there are like many opportunities and sources available. So I'm not sure to which extent, you know, this is just used for political purposes, which is okay. I mean, that's what people do all the time with these pipelines. I remember the days of the Nabucco pipeline, which was like a competing project to Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, which then at the end of the day had also a lot of political issues to deal with. Excellent. Great. So now we move to the Q&A. And so we got a bunch of questions, and we will start in good order with the first question from Max. And I will summarize the question a little bit. And the question to us, Steve, is our views on carbon pricing. I think something the late George Shultz was also working on and advocating. I remember I saw him the last time in Stanford, like 3 years ago. I mean, absolutely fascinating, you know, given his age and everything, what he had to say. And so carbon pricing in particular, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, which puts an increasing price on carbon and returns all the revenues as a dividend to all Americans. So what's your view, Steve?
First, there absolutely should be a price on carbon. Everybody understands this. Even if you're a free marketeer, you must recognize that society pays a price for the carbon in the atmosphere, and that must be priced in. Here's the reality. The real price of carbon, if you look at most data, is about $200 a ton it's put in. Mr. Trump wanted to charge it conveniently $20 to help out his friends in the oil and gas industry. If you ask economists, there's a joke in the economics field that economists agree on nothing except that a price of carbon is a good thing. Whether you're on the left or right, almost all of them will say the world needs a price on carbon. It was, I think, very difficult for elected officials to do because no one wants a carbon tax. But I think with a new surge of millennial voters, a president's realizing that global warming is not a hoax, but it is happening, I think you will see for the first time a discussion around the world on what is an appropriate global price on carbon. My gut is it will be fixed somewhere around $200. The question is, do you start with a exchange first and then move because that's more politically palatable and then move to a tax? Or can you make the jump to a tax in one step? We will see different countries are affected in different ways. So this is a bit more of a bitter pill to swallow in places like China than in the US. But the world is inexorably moving in the direction of charging, creating a carbon price. And I will tell you flat out, it's a good thing. By the way, it's also increasingly political popular.
Excellent. So here we have the next question from Jean-Marc. Greetings to you. I can start with that answering. Should buildings use green hydrogen for storage? Yeah, I think on hydrogen or green hydrogen, there's like, especially in Europe, there's a boom around these projects. And I think that what we see right now, it's a lot of the activities are in an R&D kind of phase still. I mean, you know, people start building plants and so on, but then the question is what to do with the hydrogen. So I think one of the highlight projects for green hydrogen would have been the last Olympics, which are moved to this year. God knows if they will take place, because Tokyo decided that they want to use green hydrogen to electrify the Olympic Village. And actually, the hydrogen would have been shipped with trucks to the plant at the Olympic Village, which is kind of not ideal, I would say. So I think we have to find out, you know, how to use, for example, existing grid infrastructure for hydrogen, and then create what we call sector coupling. So combine the transportation sector, the electricity sector, and the heating sector, because these are like the energy absorbing sectors, in a way that it becomes 100% renewables. And I think we believe that green hydrogen will play a very, very important role in that, to ship energy over longer distances using existing infrastructure. So if you then go to the building level, I mean, what it definitely probably will be used for is like creating electricity and heat. So for example, in hospitals, you already use gas today for these small combined units. Whether for storage, that will be a question of the marginal cost for storage. So is it cheaper to use hydrogen versus electrical batteries? I don't know how hydrogen resonates from a risk perspective, but there might be some issues. And I know, Steve, you have some views on hydrogen transportation and storage as well.
Yeah, look, I agree with everything Florian just said. But first, the concept of green hydrogen is great. Who doesn't want a vehicle that has nothing but oxygen and a few drips of water coming out the exhaust pipe? But you must understand the difference between the bleeding edge and the leading edge. And today, green hydrogen, you're probably talking about $7.50, sort of per kilowatt equivalent, and you need to get down to sort of $2.50. So it's a good thing. it just will take a while to improve the technology, because right now green hydrogen doesn't just occur, it requires a great deal of energy to produce. And people often say, but hydrogen vehicles are great. The vehicles are fine. The challenge with hydrogen vehicles is you must build out a charging network. And hydrogen facilities are rather expensive. Think $2 to $3 million for something that looks and feels a bit like a gas station, versus electric charging stations that are dramatically less expensive. And there are already a proliferation of over 100,000 in the US alone, and a similar number in Europe. So I think green hydrogen will come. I think it's probably at least 5 and more likely 10 years out. And just know it's not going to be cheap to build out the infrastructure. And I think you're much more likely to see it first for long haul trucks, where you only need to build the stations. In the US would be on Freeway 80 going across country, east to west. So it will, we'll see. I hope there are some great breakthroughs. We can use any bit of green energy we can get, but if you were going to make an investment, I would keep your wallet in your back pocket when it comes to green hydrogen for at least 5 years.
Yeah, and that's always a good indicator. The next question is from Jürgen from Germany. Do you expect that current regulations have to be adjusted to enable a more cost-optimized decarbonization of the energy system? For example, unbundling, access to control customer electricity demand by network operators, and so on.
Yeah, look, the short answer is yes. Virtually every government is making commitments to get to zero carbon or carbon neutral. Companies are doing the same thing, and you're going to see a combination of two things: a varieties of new technologies that help us get there more quickly. By the way, you will, as I said before, see the world go to electric vehicles more quickly than ever, and to autonomous vehicles. So not every human being feels compelled to buy their own car. And then you will see governments putting incentives in place to get there more quickly. So this is the way of the world, and virtually every country on the planet now is going the same direction.
Yeah. Then we have a question around solar from Boris, apparently, from, yeah, I can't disclose whom he works for, but a big solar player. And this is around the I think the tariffs, and to which extent, you know, inflexible feed-in tariffs cause trouble in Germany or also in the US. So I think the role, you know,
Yep.
what we saw in solar, how this relates to tariffs or not. Any ideas?
So look, just briefly, to get to a world of distributed energy, where more and more people can put solar on their roofs and an electric car, and we get to the point where people don't have to pay a penny for electricity or gasoline, this is what we're targeting. So you need to give people incentives to generate, to provide their own energy. We need to have feed-in tariffs. The incumbent energy firms, including some of our investors, have been resistant to some of these in the past because it's expensive. And we need to give people more incentives to produce and trade their own energy. And I would also add a diversified, democratized energy network is a good thing, because one of the things we worry about in the US is a cyber attack on our energy grid. And our grid is probably at least 10 years behind where the European grid is. So a distributed energy network is a good thing. And we need to put every incentive in place, including new streamlined tariffs to get there sooner.
Thank you. Now I have a question from Nina. Nina wants to know, would you say the different states in the US are equally ready to embark on a zero carbon energy transition?
No, no. Many states are behind, some are leading forward. And I think the good news is California's shown the way that you can have incentives to move toward renewable energy and make the system work. Now, obviously, our power is a little expensive than other parts of the country, but that will change as the cost of solar and wind goes down. But the US government, and I believe under Biden, there will be RPS standards, not just at the state level, but nationally that will move us there sooner. But California has showed you can build a large economy. In our case, the world's 5th largest economy, and I think we may hit number 4 in the next year or two. We can make this happen, and that green energy is not a science experiment, and it's not out of the money or too expensive. It's in fact a better solution, a healthier solution, and a less expensive solution.
Yeah. Now I have a couple of questions around the grid in the US. I will try to aggregate them. So you stressed the importance of electrification. That would need a big investment in grids in the US. Currently, the deployment of modern grids in the US is not easy.
Yes.
Regulatory fences, organizational fences, I can tell you, dealing with some of these guys, very atomized. Do you believe there are going to be large regulatory changes in this area? And how do we get to a more modern grid fast?
Yeah. So this question, Nur, is 100% correct. Western Europe is the model for doing this properly. The US has not kept up. The reason is we have 50 states. We're quite a large country. They tend to be run at the state level. That was, well, look, there are 2 points here. One, when you talk about the cost of power, it shouldn't just be the cost per kilowatt of production. You should also be incorporating the cost of society that they have to pay for this. In the United States, we calculate there's roughly 11,000 people that die a year as a direct result of carbon exhaust in the air, and that is probably an understatement. So I think if you can ever get to total life cycle cost of energy, carbon-based fuels will need to begin to factor in the health impact on the country. If you've ever been to China, you realize how acute this issue is. Here's one fact to tuck away. The Harvard Health Project estimated that China will have over 82 million people die of lung-related diseases over the next 25 years. That is a stunning thing. It'll put pressure on Xi Jinping and other policymakers to move off the coal addiction that they have, not just because it's good for the planet, but because it will create political instability. So we will see. But in the US and Western Europe, we should be ahead of this curve, and they should be pricing carbon, and that would go a long way toward solving this problem more quickly.
We have a hyper-engaged audience here, so I've got another question.
Hyper-engaged, we like that. I'll try to get
it's awesome, yeah. Another question. In Germany, the participation of people in investing in renewables, e.g. investing in cooperative companies, is very popular. Will this also be popular in the US? And how is the public view on this, energy cooperatives?
The short answer, and we have a slide we use at our marketing deck, is when I founded our company 13 years ago, people said, Steve, we love green, we love solar, but who's making money? Where are the billion-dollar companies in this solar energy and electric car revolution you talk about? And the answer is, in 2008, when I founded our firm, there were 0. Today, there's over a dozen firms, Sunrun and Vivint and Tesla and one after another. And if you look at it, over half of them are what they call not just unicorns worth $1 billion, they're worth $10 billion, they're decacorns. So this area of smart energy, smart vehicles has gone from being nowhere to one of the fastest growing sectors in the investment world. So just know the world is heading that way. Even in the US, and you're already seeing it now with this electric and autonomous car boom. It's the way of the future. By the way, millennials are demanding this in their companies. So the whole narrative has gone from green energy is nice, but it's too expensive. The new narrative is if you want to reach your millennial customers, as Mary Barra, the head of GM, did, you need to get out front of this. And that's part of why GM, for the first time, said our company will be all electric within 14 years. So the wheels are moving. My job's to help get the world there faster.
That's a perfect segue to the next question, which is, what is the long-term renewable potential of the US? What proportion of energy demand could it cover, and how long to build out?
So again, I think you're going to see this happening faster than ever, and it's happening for 3 reasons. we say a confluence of three things. First, millennial customers have passed baby boomers as the largest buying cohort in the world. And every company from Coca-Cola to IBM to General Motors knows they better be talking about green in all of their products because that's what consumers want. Second, you've got the people that really matter, which are utilities and the car companies. How soon will utilities go greener? How soon will the car companies go all electric? And third, you have government policy. And again, now with President Biden in charge, you will see a complete green energy issue that will affect all segments. By the way, one of the questioners said, how soon can we get on with carbon pricing and a carbon tax? The sooner we get that direction, and it's immediately understood that if you're a carbon producer and you're poisoning the air that everybody breathes, you must pay a price. That is a smart thing and a good place to be. I think Biden's going to get us there quickly. And the fact that we're now rejoining the civilized world with the common market and so on, I think our new Secretary of State, Blinken, will actually be playing a key role in helping to forge some of these relationships. I'm optimistic, and we hope the Europeans will have us back.
So for the grid and also renewables, do you think that we need less regulation or more market? There's a question on this whole topic.
Look, we probably need more regulation to get us where we need to go, because it's not always cost efficient for utilities and others to make the upfront long-term investment necessary. So government will need to play a role. That having been said, you always want to unleash the entrepreneurs like Elon to push the envelope and develop these new technologies. I want to just pause here, tell one very quick story because it's instructive. When I worked at the Department of Energy, Jimmy Carter, who was one of the most wonderful people ever, said, I am going to install CAFE standards because the US is the land of gas guzzlers, and I'm going to require that our cars get to 25 or 26 miles per gallon. And all of American industry and the auto industry and the oil industry all came together as one and said, you're a socialist, you don't understand, job killer, this is the worst thing ever. Now, everybody knew that the automakers were already making vehicles that got 26 miles per gallon in Europe and in Asia already. There's no reason they couldn't do it in the US, and eventually we did. Fast forward, this was in the late 70s, 2014, President Obama did the same thing. And he said, we haven't moved the CAFE standard up. We haven't raised the CAFE standard in 40, forgive me, goddamn years. What's wrong with you people? We're going to raise it to 36 miles per gallon. And guess what? The Chamber of Commerce, the auto industry, the oil industry all came out once again and said, you're a socialist. This, by the way, in America, that's the ultimate insult. You're a socialist. This is all terrible. We can't do it. It's a job killer. And of course, people knew the auto industry was already selling cars at 36 miles per gallon in Europe and in Asia, and the US got there. Here's the punchline. Jimmy Carter was a hero. Barack Obama will go down as a hero, but the real hero may turn out to be Elon Musk, because he made a car and the new Model 3 gets 123 mile per gallon equivalent. That's a 5x increase. Forget going to 26 to 36. This is a 5x increase. But here is the even bigger story. If you're driving an electric car in Idaho, the miles per gallon equivalent is actually much less than 123 miles per gallon, because it is a coal-based grid system. If you're in California, that's largely renewables, your miles per gallon is closer to 200 miles per gallon. And I will tell you flat out, more utilities in California, in America, and around the globe are going renewable. And you will find out that the miles per gallon equivalent that electric vehicles get is going to be moving closer to 200 miles per gallon than people think. That is a game changer for the planet, and that point is not lost on the Chinese. Let's hope we can get there sooner.
Perfect segue into car-related questions. I have a great questions from Germany. Why do you believe in Volkswagen? A company is more than a CEO. VW is perceived as a very lame duck in Germany, and the new Golf is a disaster compared to a Tesla. I couldn't have said it better. So, so why do you believe in Volkswagen? What's, what is?
So look, first, I think you need a guy at the top with vision, and I think Herbert Diess has this. Second, I like the ED 3 and the 4. I think they're moving in the right direction, and I think they've moved more quickly than a lot of the others. But we'll see. He must continue to make new generations of vehicles. I also believe the new electric Porsche Taycan at $79,000. That is a very attractive alternative to Tesla. So I think for the first time, they're coming up with some interesting alternatives. I happen to agree with everything you said about the Golf, but we see Tesla's not easy to keep up with. The other people to keep a close eye on are the Chinese. They're not messing around. The quality of their vehicles is improving, and they're able to come to the market copying our models. If you saw the Xpeng, it's almost identical to the Tesla. It is essentially a flat-out ripoff at virtually half the price. So look, competition is a good thing for consumers. The faster we get electric is a good thing for the planet. I hope the US can continue to do well. We'll see. I hope Mr. Musk doesn't move his attention to making great vehicles over to just getting us to Mars or whatnot. We still need to fix this vehicle problem.
Yeah. Another vehicle questions. What role do you think will bidirectional EV powerful play? So for example, for emergency power for wildfires, but also it's a big topic for flexibility management for electricity grid, so that you use the car as storage versus putting power walls into garages and things like that.
Look, we were always taught two things growing up. And again, I've been in the energy space for 40 years. I've had 2 books published on the future of utilities. We were told there are 2 immutable truths in energy. One, you need utilities. We must have utilities because they produce the power. And second, power only goes one direction. Well, we now know neither of those are true absolutes. The fact is, many people can produce distributed power. We passed a law in January in California. Every new home must have solar on the roof. That creates some interesting challenges for the utilities. And I know that Germany is doing the same thing now in states like Bavaria, passing their own requirements that solar be built on the roof. So we're moving toward this world of distributed energy, but now we get to the role of the utility. We will need to require someone, I believe the utility, to provide a bi-directional grid. And it will be expensive, but it will be in the best interest of the people. But that will be part of the role of an appropriate regulatory system. But then Germany may need to show us the way. We'll see.
Another EV car questions. So are electric cars truly greener than the other cars? The short answer is it depends on the source of the electrons that go into the car. Steve, what's your take?
The short answer is electric vehicles are absolutely emphatically greener than any other alternative available today. Now, are they perfect? No, they rely on batteries, and batteries can be toxic, and they also have rare earth minerals that we need to be very careful about, specifically cobalt. But net electric vehicles are dramatically better. What is interesting is to see if we can make lithium-ion batteries with less cobalt, less of the dangerous rare earth minerals, and can we get better at recycling? We're seeing a lot of deal flow in this area, and I think literally within 10 years, you will see a much greener battery. By the way, customers are demanding it. Mr. Musk has already promised it. We'll see if Volkswagen, Toyota, General Motors can keep up with this.
Thank you. Now a tricky one.
Good. I've been waiting for
your seatbelt. So from Eric, what isn't getting attention that needs to get some attention? What company needs to exist that doesn't exist today?
Wow.
It's a very good one.
Yeah, going back to this last person's question, we need more earth-friendly alternatives to the current battery chemistry. And there will be a global race to provide greener batteries and recycled. So that is a big area. The other thing that almost nobody thinks about, but in very simple terms, plugging your car in to the grid at your home can take between half and 2/3 as much energy as the entire home. And when you get thousands and then millions of people plugging in at once, you have the potential to do damage to the utility grid or network, blow out transformers and so on. We have one company, happens to be called Weave Grid, that is one of the leaders in ensuring that cars access the grid in a smart way, all predetermined ahead of time. So even if everybody plugs in when they get back from work, say between 6 and 7, it will distribute when the cars charge up to not create big peaks and troughs. So we're seeing lots of interesting cars, new things all the time. And the one last thing I would say is I grew up in Silicon Valley, and there's nothing here. I've had a front row seat to the entire revolution in Silicon Valley. And 10 and 20 years ago, we did not see that many really impressive entrepreneurs in Europe. But I think starting with the Samwar brothers, we have seen over the last decade or two an extraordinary number of truly impressive entrepreneurs in Europe. And we think that curve is going like this. So I think we're looking at 2 investments in Europe as we speak. I think that's good news for Europe. It's good news for the world. Just don't let the French beat you.
Excellent. Yes. So we have 10 minutes to go in the chat. Here's another one. Do you see green air travel technologies evolving?
Sorry, green
air travel.
Yes. You know, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, what is one thing you don't see happening? I would have said lithium-ion batteries are great, power density going up, efficiency going up, range going up, but you're not going to see these things in airplanes because they're heavy. The reality is the efficiency of lithium-ion batteries has increased so much and the weight's gone down so quickly. We're now seeing more and more business plans for electric aircraft. As you understand, because of the physics, you're not likely to see transoceanic or continental air travel, but Norway, God bless the Norwegians, always out front, have already said by 2040 they will require all intracontinental sub 60 or 90-minute flights to be electric. So for short haul air travel, electric will be a thing, and I think it's about 10 to 15 years out, but we're seeing more and more coming more quickly. And where you'll see it pop up, I think most quickly, is you'll see flying electric taxis that will do short hops, like between downtown Manhattan to JFK Airport. And that's going to be around the corner. You'll see that popping up within a year or two, and longer term flights for things like Boston, New York, San Francisco, LA, Paris, Munich, coming sooner.
Excellent. Here's another question that targets the customer relationship and the innovations. So, I mean, in a utility context, I remember I did a talk with at an Edison International Conference with Andy Vesey, so the former CEO of PG&E and former CEO of AIG in Australia. And he made the statement that in general, the customer experience of a utility company is like walking barefoot on rusty nails, quote unquote, so his words. So do you see that this is a space where innovation takes place, digital solutions can deliver some value?
Yeah, I love this question. I think it's 100% true. And look, in Silicon Valley, there is no doubt we've created an innovation revolution like the world has never seen. We're at the forefront. It's extraordinary what we're doing in the US. In terms of our utilities, they've chosen to follow the 1960s Soviet model of lacking customer support. And it's largely because we have a monopoly system, such that no matter how bad you are, people really couldn't leave until a few years ago when the cost of solar came down so much that people could resign from their utility. I will tell you now, because we have so many utility investors, there is a nationwide, a global commitment to make utilities more customer engagement oriented, because literally every utility in the world realizes it's easier than ever for individuals to secede from their utility. And so we're literally working with utilities around the world to come up with more green, pro-consumer, pro-democratized ways to get customers what they want, which is greener, cheaper, more convenient energy with new devices that will bring, say, energy efficiency to the home. But we're working heavily on customer engagement. It's fascinating to watch.
Another one, do you see in this clean tech, climate, energy space a tech company that has the potential to disrupt the industry like Tesla is doing?
So this is what I wake up every morning searching for. There are a number of companies around the world that we think are interesting. Octopus in the UK is a very interesting model, going global. Origin in one of our utilities, Tokyo Gas and Power, have invested in it. There's a Norwegian company of all things called Tibber that is an interesting model. There's a firm called Arcadia in the East Coast, but we haven't really seen that runaway winner in the energy space confidentially. I say to 150 of my closest friends here, confidentially, we're working at consolidating 2 or 3 of our portfolio companies that could perhaps be this billion-dollar unicorn of the future that helps serve as sort of a turnkey solution for utilities and all things electric and customer service, customer engagement focused.
One of the last questions is, are there any signs that the Biden administration will make new commitments for R&D funding, applied R&D or basic research for addressing climate change issues?
Yes, without a doubt. I should say I know President Biden for 30 years. He has been to our house. We have done events for him, and I will tell you, he is deeply committed to basic R&D research. It's something that I think was deprioritized under the Trump years. Biden will ramp this up. He understands that America's competitive future lies in our ability for our universities to do world-class R&D, and I think you will see him refund universities at a higher level than it's been for the last decade.
Excellent. So in the light of time, we have a few outstanding questions which we have to postpone to answer next time. I think some of the shades of these questions we try to touch. Thank you very, very much for attending. So first, thank you to our attendees. Also, thank you to the team that helped us to organize that. Thank you very much, Steve. It was a pleasure. We will also put this video online for people that couldn't join. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you. Proud to be part of it. And it's always fun. I hope it was stimulating discussion. I know people may not agree with us on every issue, but our goal was to create a good dialogue, and we're delighted with all of the questions and participation.
Thank you so much. And everyone stay safe and healthy, and speak to you or see you soon.
Great. Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Thanks, Florian.